Have you ever judged someone at first glance, assuming you know all there is to know about them based on a quick look? Maybe it was the clothes they wore, the way they spoke, or their age that led you to think you could predict their life story. But here's the thing, life has a funny way of flipping those assumptions on their head when you least expect it. Today, I'm going to tell you a story about a moment where judgment turned into a jaw-dropping revelation, and trust me, you won't want to miss the twist that comes at the end. Picture this. A crowded gym, the clanking of weights, the hum of treadmills in the background. It's that time of day when people are either working off the stress of their day or pushing themselves to new limits, determined to get fitter, stronger, or just feel better about themselves. Everyone's in their own world, doing their thing, but when a woman walks into the gym, she unknowingly becomes the center of attention. She's in her 60s, not the typical gym-goer you might expect. The younger crowd barely notices her at first, but one man, who's about to learn a lesson he'll never forget, can't help but take notice. He sees her, shaking his head, perhaps even chuckling under his breath. Too old to be here, isn't she? That's what he thinks. Maybe he's there to show off his perfect form, or maybe he's just feeling smug about his youth and strength. Either way, he makes a snide comment, loud enough for the woman to hear. "You're too old to be working out here. This is for people who are still in their prime." Now, what would you do if someone said that to you? Would you be offended? Would you fire back, ready to prove them wrong? Or maybe you'd walk away, not giving them the satisfaction of a response. But what happens next will completely change how you look at this entire situation. Because here's the thing, you've entered this video for a reason. You want to know what happens next, right? You want to know how this moment plays out, and let me tell you, it's not what anyone would expect. What this man doesn't know, and what you're about to learn, is that this woman isn't just another gym member. She's not some random grandma trying to break a sweat. She's a champion, and her story is one that's going to leave you in awe. The twist you're about to witness is more than just a simple payback or comeback. It's a moment that'll make you rethink your perceptions of age, strength, and who really has the right to make judgments. Now, before we get into the big reveal, I want you to think for a second. Have you ever underestimated someone? Have you ever written them off because of their age, their appearance, or even their background? Maybe it's a natural human instinct to categorize people, to make snap judgments based on what we think we know. But what if, just what if, you were wrong? What if there was more to the story than meets the eye? Stick with me, because this story is about to flip everything on its head in a way that's going to leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about people, age, and strength. The tension in that gym was thick. The man who spoke that comment probably thought he was being funny, maybe even showing off in front of his friends or the people around him. But what happens next will challenge his perception of reality in a way he never saw coming. And here's where you come in. You're about to watch as this woman, who's been quietly lifting weights, moving through her routine like any dedicated gym-goer, takes the spotlight. But it's not just the weights she's lifting that will shock you, it's her title. As you're watching this unfold, I want you to really think about how quickly we jump to conclusions. How often do we make assumptions about people based on the surface level? And what happens when we're forced to face the truth that our assumptions were all wrong? Keep watching, because the next few moments will show you just how quickly life can turn around. You might be thinking this is going to be just another revenge story, but trust me, it's much deeper than that. What happens next will leave you with a new sense of respect, not just for this woman, but for anyone who's ever been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed. It's a reminder that you never know who you're dealing with until you take the time to truly understand their story. And sometimes, it's the ones we think are too old, too weak, or too out of place who have the most powerful stories to tell. As the tension builds and the woman prepares to confront the man who thought he knew everything, the air in the gym is thick with anticipation. What's her next move? Will she respond with the kind of force you're expecting, or is there something else going on here? You're about to find out, but there's one more thing you need to know before I reveal the jaw-dropping twist. You see, this isn't just about a simple act of revenge. It's about proving something much more important. It's about showing that strength isn't defined by age, appearance, or the opinions of others. It's about breaking down the walls of judgment and understanding that we all have untold stories, untapped potential, and the ability to surprise those who think they've got us all figured out. So, what happens when this woman reveals her true title? Will the man who made that offhand remark regret his words? Will the crowd in the gym be left stunned by what they learn? You won't believe the answer. Stay tuned for the incredible moment that's coming up. Trust me, you'll want to be here until the very end. The mystery is only just beginning. The woman, whose name we'll come to know in just a moment, wasn't always the person she was that day at the gym. There's a lot more to her story than meets the eye, and the road that led her into that moment was anything but ordinary. To understand what she was doing in that gym, you need to go back a little further, back to a time when people around her never would have imagined she'd become the person she is today. In fact, many of her friends and family still didn't fully grasp the depths of her journey, despite her immense success and quiet power. Her name is Linda. For years, Linda had lived a relatively normal life, raising kids, managing a household, and working a 9-to-5 job just like so many others. But things began to change after a major turning point in her life. It wasn't something she ever expected, nor did she seek it out. It started small, a whisper in the back of her mind, an unfamiliar feeling that crept up on her one night after an innocent conversation with her daughter. The conversation had been about health. Her daughter, a health-conscious 30-something, had been pushing Linda to join her at the gym. Linda was hesitant, of course. She wasn't used to working out, let alone lifting weights. But what she didn't tell her daughter, what no one knew, was that Linda had a history, a background that had shaped her into someone far tougher than most could imagine. She had faced battles that could break people, events so deep and traumatic that they were locked away in the recesses of her mind. Her time in the military, years spent in high-intensity environments, had transformed her into someone capable of things that few would expect. When she finally agreed to join her daughter at the gym, Linda did so with a sense of determination that most people her age would have found hard to match. She wasn't there to play games, to chat with the other gym-goers, or to blend in with the younger crowd. She was there to challenge herself, to rebuild the strength she'd once had in ways that had nothing to do with vanity or appearance. There was something more at stake for Linda, something far deeper than just getting into shape. She wanted to prove to herself that she could still conquer whatever life threw her way, that she was far from too old to do anything. She needed this, not just for her body, but for her mind, for the silent battles she had fought, and won in ways people would never understand. But in the gym that day, as she moved through her routine, no one could have known any of this. They saw her and assumed the typical stereotypes, an older woman just trying to stay healthy. They didn't see the strength in her eyes, the scars of war hidden beneath her calm demeanor. And that was when it happened. That was when the comment was made. The man who thought he knew everything about what Linda was capable of didn't know that she was already a champion in ways that no one in that gym would ever guess. What Linda hadn't anticipated was how that single comment would stir something deep inside her. It wasn't just about him judging her. It was about the years of fighting to overcome obstacles and being constantly underestimated. Linda had spent years in silence, never telling anyone about her past or her true achievements. She wasn't a typical gym-goer, true, but that didn't mean she didn't have what it took to make a statement. Now, let's talk about the man who made that comment. On the surface, he looked like the kind of guy who prided himself on his youth, his strength, and his ability to be the center of attention. His name was Derek. He was in his mid-30s and had been a regular at the gym for years. Derek had been lifting weights since his teens, pushing himself to the limit every time he stepped foot in that gym. But what people didn't know about Derek, what no one could have guessed, was that he had his own insecurities, his own struggles that he was masking behind a facade of strength. Maybe it was his own fear of growing older, or maybe it was the pressure he felt to stay ahead of the competition, to prove to everyone, including himself, that he was still at his peak. In his mind, the gym was a place for those who were in their prime, the young, the strong, the ones with the perfect bodies. He couldn't fathom someone like Linda, someone older, someone who had already lived through so much being there. So, when he saw her, his instinct was to make a comment that would reinforce the narrative he'd created for himself, the narrative that youth and strength were all that mattered. What he didn't realize was that by making that comment, he had set something in motion that he couldn't undo. As Linda went about her routine, quietly lifting weights with determination. Derek's words echoed in the back of her mind. He thought she was weak. He thought she didn't belong. But what he didn't know was that Linda had fought battles that he could never imagine, and the weight she was lifting wasn't just physical. It was a symbol of all the emotional and psychological strength she had built over the years. The gym was buzzing with energy as usual. People came and went, working hard on their routines, trying to achieve their own fitness goals. But there was one person in the room who was now paying attention, watching everything unfold with a keen eye. And that person was the gym manager, John. He'd been around long enough to know that you couldn't judge anyone based on their appearance or age. In fact, John had been witness to more than one unexpected transformation in the gym, but he hadn't seen anything like this before. As the comment floated in the air, John's instincts told him to keep an eye on Derek. Something about the way he'd spoken to Linda didn't sit right with him. It wasn't just the words, but the tone, the arrogance, the assumption that he had the right to judge. What John didn't know at that moment was that Linda wasn't just anyone. She wasn't going to back down from a challenge. But she wasn't about to make a scene either. Instead, she was quietly preparing herself for what was coming. Derek had made a mistake, one he was about to regret. But as Linda stood up from her last set, wiped the sweat from her brow, and took a deep breath, the whole gym seemed to hold its collective breath. What was she going to do? Was she going to confront Derek, or was she going to let it slide? And then, just as everyone was wondering what would happen next, the gym door opened, and in walked someone Linda knew all too well, her old military trainer, a man she hadn't seen in years. His presence in the gym raised the stakes even higher, but for reasons nobody could have predicted. This was no ordinary trainer. He had a reputation, one that preceded him, and his arrival was about to stir the pot in ways that no one could have foreseen. As the atmosphere in the gym grew more charged, Linda knew she had to confront Derek, but things weren't going to be as simple as she had hoped. She had prepared herself for the inevitable showdown, but she hadn't prepared for what came next. Her old trainer, the one who had just walked in, wasn't the only person whose arrival would complicate matters. In fact, his presence would unknowingly open the door to a whole new set of obstacles that Linda wasn't ready for. The man, known to those who worked with him as Sergeant Tom Collins, had been one of the best physical trainers in the military. But to Linda, he wasn't just a trainer. He was someone who had been there for her during one of the darkest chapters of her life. Collins was the one who helped her recover from injuries she never thought she'd walk away from, both physical and emotional. He'd been the one to push her beyond limits she thought were impossible. When she saw him walk through the door, a rush of memories flooded her mind, but there was something else in his eyes, something that felt off, something that made her uneasy. Before she could gather her thoughts, her phone buzzed with an unexpected message. It was from her daughter, and the words were simple but urgent. "Mom, I think someone's been going through your stuff. I found a drawer unlocked that shouldn't have been. You need to be careful." Linda's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't shared anything with her daughter about the dangerous memories that were starting to resurface, nor had she told her about her military past. Her life had always been a careful balance of secrecy, a way of shielding her family from the darker parts of who she was. But now, this unexpected warning threw everything off kilter. Linda couldn't ignore it. She had to act fast, but as she started to prepare to leave, she noticed that something was missing. Her gym bag, specifically her military journal, was gone. It wasn't just any journal. It contained years of detailed notes, accounts of her military service, and clues to the events she had long buried. Linda's mind raced. She had been careful to keep that journal hidden, away from prying eyes, but now it was gone. She hadn't told anyone about it. Or had she? She couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching her more closely than she realized. Derek's offhand remark suddenly felt like part of a much bigger picture. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how many people around her could be involved in something larger than she could have anticipated. The gym manager, John, had been giving her odd looks all day, as though he knew something she didn't. But why would he want to be involved in her past? He was a former Navy SEAL, known for keeping a low profile, but Linda had never seen him show much interest in anyone's backstory. Was he hiding something? Or was he just another person to cross off the list of those who might have information? As Linda stepped outside to catch her breath, the weight of the situation started to settle in. She had always trusted people based on instinct, but now her instincts were telling her to be careful, to trust no one. She had worked too hard to keep her past buried, and now it was clawing its way back into her life. Was it just a coincidence that her journal had disappeared? Or was someone intentionally trying to stop her from uncovering something? Linda couldn't ignore the feeling that Derek's comment wasn't just a simple, thoughtless remark. It was a trigger, a signal that something far more dangerous was on the horizon. And then, just as she was about to turn back into the gym to confront Derek and figure out what had been happening, she was stopped by someone she didn't expect to see. It was Sergeant Collins. He stepped in front of her, his posture stiff, as though he had just made a decision. "Linda, I need to talk to you." "There's something you're not seeing," he said in a low voice, one that carried a tone of urgency. Her heart dropped. She had always trusted Collins. He had been a guiding figure during the worst moments of her life. But there was something in his eyes now that made her feel uneasy. She didn't know what he was going to say, but she knew it wasn't going to be good. Before she could respond, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "Listen, you have to stop digging. It's too dangerous. There are people watching you." His words hit her like a cold wave.
What was he talking about?
What did he know that she didn't? The tension in the air thickened, and for a moment, Linda didn't know what to believe. Collins had always been someone she could count on, but now his warning felt more like a threat than a helpful piece of advice. What was he trying to protect her from? Or was he trying to hide something from her? The more she thought about it, the more she realized that everything she had been trying to uncover might be more entangled than she ever thought possible. The thought that someone close to her might be hiding something, or worse, might be involved in this whole mess, gnawed at her. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was all connected. Derek, her missing journal, the warning from her daughter, and now Colin's cryptic message. It was all part of a puzzle, but Linda was missing too many pieces to see the full picture. As she looked back at the gym, she knew she couldn't stop now. Something was happening, and she was determined to find out the truth. But as the door closed behind her, she couldn't help but wonder. Was someone already one step ahead? Was the person who had been watching her closer than she ever realized? The mystery was only deepening, and Linda was about to uncover a truth that would change everything. But as she walked back in, Derek was nowhere to be found. Had he already left? Or was he hiding something as well? With every step Linda took, she felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on her. This was just the beginning. As Linda stood in the middle of the gym, trying to make sense of the chaos swirling in her mind, her phone buzzed again. This time, the message was from her daughter, Emma. The text was short but heavy with meaning. "Mom, I need to talk to you. Something happened. I don't know who to trust anymore." Linda's heart skipped a beat, and a cold chill ran down her spine. Emma had never sounded like this before. Their relationship had always been built on openness, on the kind of trust that only a mother and daughter could share. But now, something was off, and Linda knew that whatever Emma was about to say would add another layer to this mystery that she could no longer ignore. Linda quickly called her, the urgency in her voice palpable. Emma picked up on the second ring, and there was a tremor in her voice. "Mom, I don't know what's going on, but I think someone is following me. I keep getting these weird messages, and the last one it said I was getting too close to something. I don't know who it's from. It's like they know everything." The words hung in the air, and Linda felt the ground beneath her feet shift. The same feeling she had gotten earlier, the one that made her trust no one, now intensified. Emma was tangled up in something deeper than just a warning. Someone was clearly trying to push them both into a corner, to force them to stop digging into things they shouldn't. Linda's mind raced as she pieced everything together. First, Derek's comment, seemingly innocuous but clearly calculated. Then her missing journal, now gone without a trace. And now, Emma was being pulled into the same web. The connections were too precise to be mere coincidences. Something, or someone was orchestrating all of this, and the question was, why? What was the end game? And more importantly, what did they know that Linda and Emma didn't? Linda knew she couldn't afford to leave Emma in the dark. She needed to get to the bottom of this, not just for herself, but for her daughter too. But as she rushed to leave the gym, her phone buzzed again, this time with an email. The subject line was simple: the truth behind your past. Linda's hands shook as she clicked it open, praying that it wasn't another threat. What she saw, however, made her blood run cold. It was a link to a video, one she didn't recognize, but one that was unmistakably about her. The thumbnail was a grainy image of her, younger, in military gear, standing next to someone she knew all too well, Sergeant Collins. The video, when she opened it, was a montage of old footage, some of which Linda had never seen before, and in the background, a voice narrated a story about a covert mission gone wrong. It wasn't a mission she had ever talked about, not even with her daughter, but it was one that had left scars deeper than any physical injury. And now, someone was showing it to the world. Someone who knew everything. Her mind raced with questions. How had they found this footage? Who had leaked it? And more importantly, why was it being tied to her now? She had thought her military past was buried for good, locked away, where no one could touch it. But now, it seemed like someone had been tracking her every move, waiting for the right moment to expose her secrets. As the tension in her chest grew, Linda suddenly remembered something Sergeant Collins had said before he left. There are people watching you. Had he known about this video? Had he been involved in whatever was happening? Was he trying to protect her? Or was he part of the conspiracy she was slowly uncovering? Everything was starting to feel like a house of cards, ready to collapse with just one wrong move. Then, just as Linda was about to call Emma back, her phone rang again. This time it wasn't Emma. It was a blocked number, but something about the timing felt deliberate. Hesitant, Linda answered. The voice on the other end was distorted, the words coming through like they'd been altered or encrypted in some way. You're getting too close, Linda. There's still time to back off before it's too late. The people you're dealing with have more power than you realize. They can destroy everything you've worked for, everything you care about. Stop now, or things will get much worse for you and your family. The line went dead before she could respond, and Linda was left with nothing but the weight of those chilling words. She stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. Was it a warning, or was it a threat? Either way, the message was clear. She was not just in over her head, she was in deeper than she could have imagined. But there was more. Linda's phone buzzed once more, and this time it was a text from Emma. Mom, I've got something I didn't tell you. Someone's been to the house. I think they were looking for something. Please be careful. The realization hit Linda hard. The people who had been watching her weren't just after her journal. They were after something much bigger, something that Emma had unknowingly gotten involved in. But what was it? And how did it tie back to Linda's past? As Linda stood there, the pieces of the puzzle scattered around her. One question gnawed at her mind. Who could she trust? Collins, the old trainer who had been so close to her in the past, had warned her to stop digging, but was he truly trying to protect her, or was he one of the ones who wanted to silence her? What if the people watching her had known about her connection to him, about their shared history, and had used it to their advantage? With everything escalating so quickly, Linda knew there was no turning back now. She had to find out who was behind all of this, not just for herself, but for Emma. The stakes were rising, and the walls were closing in, but Linda was determined to uncover the truth. The question was, would she be able to do it before the mystery swallowed her whole, or would she, and everyone she loved, become another casualty of a past she thought she had buried forever? Just as Linda was about to take another step forward, the gym doors swung open again, and in walked someone she didn't expect to see. Derek. The same man who had started all of this with his thoughtless comment. But now, his eyes were wide with fear. Linda, he whispered, his voice shaking, you have no idea who you're dealing with. You need to get out of here.
Now.
And just like that, the mystery deepened. Was Derek trying to help, or was he the one pulling the strings all along? As Linda stood frozen, trying to process Derek's words, the weight of the situation pressed down on her with an intensity she had never known before. The gym's familiar sounds, the clink of weights, the hum of treadmills, felt miles away. Her eyes locked onto Derek, whose expression had gone from defiant to one of palpable fear. His usual swagger, the cocky attitude he wore like a badge, was completely gone. The man who had thought nothing of belittling her moments earlier now looked like a man trapped in his own skin. The sudden shift in his demeanor sent a chill through Linda's spine, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't sure who she could trust. "You don't understand," Derek said, his voice low and shaky, his gaze darting around as if he were expecting someone to appear at any moment. "There are things going on here, things you don't know. People who don't want you digging any deeper. You've stirred up something, and it's not going to end well for you." Linda's pulse quickened, and her hand instinctively reached for her phone. She had to call Emma, tell her to stay safe, but before she could unlock it, a figure in the gym caught her eye. A tall man, broad-shouldered, wearing a hoodie that obscured his face, was leaning against the wall near the entrance. His posture was rigid, too controlled. He wasn't exercising, he wasn't even looking at the gym. His eyes were locked on Linda. She froze for a split second, the same kind of unsettling recognition crawling over her skin. She had seen him before. Not in person, but his silhouette, it was unmistakable. This wasn't just anyone. Before she could process what was happening, the man's gaze intensified, and she saw him take a step toward her. That was enough. Without thinking, Linda spun around and headed straight for the exit. Derek's voice followed her, urgent and panicked. "You can't outrun this. It's too late. You don't know what's at stake." But Linda didn't stop. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as she pushed through the gym doors. The cool air outside hit her like a wave, but it did nothing to calm the rising panic in her chest. She glanced over her shoulder, no sign of the man in the hoodie, but she wasn't sure that meant she was safe. Her steps quickened as she reached her car, heart pounding in her chest. As she fumbled to unlock the door, her phone buzzed again. She barely looked at the screen. "Emma. Mom, I can't reach you. Please call me." Linda's hand trembled as she quickly dialed Emma's number, but before the call connected, her car door slammed shut with a force that made her jump. The man in the hoodie was standing right there, inches away from the car, staring at her through the window. His expression was unreadable, but his presence was undeniable. He didn't say a word. His eyes just bore into hers like they were searching for something, anything. Linda's breath caught in her throat, and a paralyzing fear settled deep in her stomach. How long had he been watching her? Had he been tailing her for days, maybe longer? She didn't know, but she knew one thing for sure. He wasn't alone. The moments stretched on, an eternity of silence broken only by the rhythmic pounding of her heart. She tried to calm herself, trying to rationalize her fear. He's just a stranger. He hasn't done anything. I'll drive away and never see him again. But in her gut, she knew that was a lie. Everything in her body screamed that this was just the beginning. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a voicemail notification. She couldn't take her eyes off the man outside, but she knew she had to check it. Slowly, with a hand that felt like lead, she pressed play. The voice on the other end was distorted, too muffled to make out the words at first, but as the voice grew clearer, her blood ran cold. "You're playing with fire, Linda. And fire always burns." The line went dead. For a moment, Linda could only sit there, the weight of the situation crashing down on her. Every part of her wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but she couldn't. She couldn't let him know how terrified she was. And she couldn't stay here much longer. Her mind raced with possibilities. Who was this person? Was he connected to the man in the gym, or was he something else entirely? But the questions only piled on, and no answers were forthcoming. Then, just as Linda's hand finally gripped the door handle to drive away, the phone rang again. It was Emma. The relief she felt upon seeing her daughter's name made her hesitate for a fraction of a second. She answered it quickly, trying to hide the panic in her voice. "Mom, I don't know what's going on, but I can't find Dad," Emma said, her voice frantic. "I've been trying to reach him all day. I went to his place, and it's like he's disappeared. His car's gone, and there's a note on the door that says, "Don't look for him." Linda's heart sank. Her ex-husband, the one man who had always seemed untouchable, unreachable, now gone. What had happened to him? And why had he left this note behind? "Emma, listen to me.
Get to a safe place.
Do not go looking for him. We need to figure out what's happening." But as Linda looked out the windshield, she saw the man in the hoodie step away from the car and begin to walk toward her. Slowly, deliberately. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her instinct screamed at her to drive, to get out of there, but she couldn't leave Emma alone, not with what was happening. The air felt thick with tension, and Linda's mind was racing through 1,000 different scenarios, none of which made sense. Was Emma's father somehow involved in all of this? Had he been part of something Linda didn't know about? What had he gotten himself into, and why was it now pulling her and Emma into a nightmare they couldn't escape? The man in the hoodie stopped a few feet away from the car and finally spoke. His voice was low, almost imperceptible. "You're out of time, Linda. The past is coming for you, and it won't be stopped.
Not now.
Not ever." And just like that, the world seemed to close in on Linda. She had no more answers, only more questions. But one thing was painfully clear now. She was being hunted. Someone had been watching her for far too long, and they weren't going to stop until she paid for whatever it was she had uncovered. The question was, how much time did she have left before it was too late? Linda's mind was racing, her heart pounding in her chest as she tried to process everything that had happened in the past few hours. The man in the hoodie had just disappeared into the shadows of the gym's parking lot, and she was left with more questions than answers. Her phone buzzed again, but this time, she hesitated before answering. She knew it was Emma, but something inside her warned her that picking up the phone might lead to something she wasn't ready for. Instead, she placed the phone down, her fingers trembling against the cold metal of the steering wheel. Her thoughts were a whirlwind. She had been trying to make sense of what had happened when she stumbled across the gym's strange undercurrent. Derek's cryptic warning, the mysterious man outside, and that chilling voicemail. It all felt connected. She had convinced herself that the whole thing was bigger than her, bigger than anything she could have imagined. But something wasn't right. As Linda sat in the driver's seat, with the key in the ignition, she could almost hear the echo of the man's words. "The past is coming for you, and it won't be stopped." Just as she was about to start the car and drive away, something stopped her, something she hadn't thought of until now. The gym. More specifically, the training facility she had just left. The man had been watching her, but it wasn't just because of her past. She had been so focused on the threats, the danger, the shadowy figures that had emerged, but there was one thing she had failed to see. Derek's warning wasn't just some vague statement. There are things going on here, things you don't know. He hadn't just been talking about the gym or her. Linda's mind snapped back to the first conversation she had had with Derek. He had mentioned something odd, the idea that certain people weren't supposed to be there. At the time, she had thought he was just trying to intimidate her, trying to push her out of the gym. But now, looking at the situation through a different lens, Linda realized something that made her blood run cold. She was a pawn in something far bigger than a simple intimidation game. Without warning, her phone rang again. It was Emma, but this time Linda couldn't bring herself to answer. Her hand hovered over the screen, but she stopped, her breath caught in her throat. She had to think, had to step back and look at the bigger picture. It was then, as her phone buzzed incessantly in her lap, that Linda had an epiphany. Derek's words weren't just about her being in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were about Emma. Linda's heart stopped for a second as her mind made the connection. Emma had been acting strangely ever since they'd started discussing her father's disappearance, and now, with all these new pieces falling into place, Linda realized that maybe the story wasn't what it seemed. Maybe Emma wasn't just a victim in this situation. Maybe she had known more than Linda had thought. Maybe Emma had been involved in something from the start. It was then that Linda remembered something she had missed entirely, the day Emma had first told her about her dad's disappearance. It had been too calm, too perfect. No tears, no fear. Emma had been eerily composed. Linda had chalked it up to her daughter trying to stay strong, but now, everything was beginning to feel wrong. Too many coincidences, too many unanswered questions. Suddenly, A text message popped up on her phone. It was from Emma, but it was unlike any other message Linda had received. It was short, cryptic. They know. It's time to make a choice. Linda's stomach twisted as she stared at the words, her mind racing to understand their meaning. What did Emma mean by they? And what choice was she referring to? The sense of dread that had been mounting since this whole ordeal began exploded inside her, leaving her breathless. Her daughter had just given her a warning, but the true weight of those words didn't hit Linda until the panic started to set in. What if Emma had been involved all along? What if she knew about the man in the hoodie, about Derek, about everything that was happening? With a cold, sharp feeling creeping through her veins, Linda felt like she was being pulled into a labyrinth of deceit. Her mind flashed back to earlier that evening when she had gone through Emma's things, searching for any clue to explain the strange behavior. In the back of a drawer, hidden beneath a stack of old books, Linda had found a phone number written on a small piece of paper. It hadn't registered at the time. She'd assumed it was just an old contact. But now, with everything that was happening, Linda realized she'd overlooked it. The number wasn't just any number. It was the same number Derek had given her, the one he had claimed was important. A chill ran down Linda's spine as she realized what that meant. Emma had been keeping this number from her. And worse, she had known about it the whole time. Linda's thoughts were spinning faster and faster until it felt like the ground beneath her was slipping away. But just as Linda was about to call the number, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from the gym's app. A strange message appeared on her screen. You're too late. The choice has already been made. Linda felt a cold sweat form on her brow. What did this mean? Who had sent this message? And what was the choice they were referring to? She had been trying to piece everything together, but the truth felt more and more elusive. She was no longer just a victim of circumstance. She was a player in a game she didn't understand, and the stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined. The past, the threats, the mystery, it was all connected in ways she had never expected. Before Linda could process this revelation, her phone rang once more. This time, she answered it without hesitation. Mom. Emma's voice trembled on the other end. I need to tell you everything, but you have to promise me you won't hate me. Linda's heart pounded in her chest as she realized, in that instant, that everything she thought she knew was about to change forever. Linda stood frozen in her car, the night air thick with a tension that seemed to press down on her chest. She hadn't moved for what felt like hours, the phone still clutched in her trembling hand, Emma's voice ringing in her ears. I need to tell you everything, but you have to promise me you won't hate me. The words echoed in her mind, a haunting reminder that everything Linda thought she knew about her daughter, about her life, her family, was a lie. She had always trusted Emma, believed in her, and now she was questioning everything. The phone call wasn't a revelation of innocence. No, it was a twisted confession, a final plea before the truth came crashing down. But the worst part wasn't Emma's words. It was the silence that followed. That quiet, ominous pause that lingered between them. What could Emma possibly say that would explain everything Linda had just uncovered? What could justify the lies, the secrets, and the dangerous game they were now caught in? Linda's heart raced. The choice before her was unbearable. If she confronted Emma, she might lose her forever. But if she didn't, the consequences could be far worse. Every instinct told her to hang up, to drive away, to cut ties with everyone involved in this web of deceit. But there was a part of her, the part that had spent years raising her daughter, the part that knew Emma better than anyone, that told her to listen. Linda needed to know. She needed the truth, even if it meant destroying everything she loved. She took a deep breath, steadying herself as the phone pressed harder into her ear. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about Emma, about their family, and now, about something much darker than either of them had ever imagined. Mom. Emma's voice came again, quieter this time, filled with an almost unbearable weight. I didn't want to get you involved, but I didn't have a choice. It's all gone too far, and now they want me to make a decision. We have to act fast. Linda felt the blood drain from her face.
Who was they?
What was Emma talking about? She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words stuck in her throat, suffocated by the sheer terror in Emma's voice. The daughter she thought she knew was now a stranger, someone caught in a web of decisions Linda could barely begin to understand. "Emma, what's going on? What decision?" Linda's voice cracked, her fear clawing its way to the surface. She had spent years trying to protect her daughter from the dangers of the world, from the lies and the secrets, but now she realized she was in deeper than she ever expected. This wasn't just about Emma anymore. It was about something bigger, something that involved everyone they knew, and possibly more. The truth was out there, just beyond reach, but as she sat in the car, the decision she was being forced to make felt almost impossible. "I don't know if I can tell you everything," Emma whispered, and the vulnerability in her voice hit Linda like a punch to the gut. "But I'll try. The people who've been following me, they know about you. About everything. And they're giving me an ultimatum. I have to choose between you and the truth, Mom. If I tell you what's going on, if I bring you any deeper, it could put you in danger. But if I don't, it'll tear everything apart. I don't know what to do." Linda's mind reeled. The weight of Emma's words was too much to bear. She had always believed that protecting her daughter was her role, that no matter what happened, she would be the one who kept Emma safe. But now, Emma was caught between two impossible choices, one that would lead to the truth and one that would protect them both. Linda's heart twisted as she thought about the consequences. If Emma told her everything, if she came clean about what was really going on, they could both be in grave danger. But if Emma chose to protect her by keeping quiet, they would continue to live this lie, each day more suffocating than the last. It was a decision that no one should have to make, a burden too heavy for a child, and yet here Emma was, carrying it all alone. "Emma, I don't care what it takes," Linda finally said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll help you. You're not alone in this. We'll get through this together. But you have to tell me what's going on."
Now.
For a moment, there was silence on the other end of the line. Linda could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, the air thick with the uncertainty of the future. Emma's decision would change everything, would rewrite their reality in ways Linda couldn't yet understand. She had always wanted to protect her daughter, but now it was clear that Emma was the one who needed protecting. "Mom," Emma said finally, her voice trembling, "I don't know who I can trust anymore. I've made so many mistakes, and I can't take them back. But there's something you need to know about Derek.
He's not who he says he is.
He's been manipulating all of us from the start. And the man who's been following me? He's not some random threat. He's someone connected to the people who've been watching us. And now they're demanding answers. They know too much. They've been waiting for me to make a choice, and now they want you." Linda's stomach dropped. The shock of Emma's confession hit her like a tidal wave, and for the first time, she realized just how deep this web of deceit stretched. Derek, the man who had warned her at the gym, the man who had pushed her away, he wasn't just a threat. He was a key player in whatever was happening. And now, it was clear that Linda wasn't just a bystander. She had been pulled into this nightmare whether she liked it or not. "Emma, we need to get out of here. We need to disappear before it's too late," Linda said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her fear was palpable, her body trembling with the realization that they were running out of time. But as the words left her mouth, Linda knew something else. No matter what she did, no matter how hard she tried to protect Emma, she couldn't outrun the truth. And the truth, no matter how terrifying, was coming for them both. Linda had always tried to shield her daughter from the darkness of the world, but now, as the phone line crackled in her ear, she realized the truth. Sometimes, the darkness comes from within. And this time, it wasn't just something they could run from. It was something they had to face, no matter the cost. Linda's heart pounded as she drove through the empty streets, the headlights of her car cutting through the fog that had settled in the air like a blanket of dread. She could barely keep her hands steady on the wheel, each breath ragged, every thought fractured. The phone call with Emma still echoed in her mind, the weight of her daughter's confession heavy in the air. Derek, the man who had seemed so trustworthy, so protective, he was not only involved, but he was orchestrating this entire nightmare. Emma's voice had trembled when she mentioned him, her tone laced with fear, as if the very thought of Derek brought something darker to mind than Linda could fathom. But what was the truth behind him? What had he done? And who else was involved? As Linda drove, she kept her eyes on the rearview mirror, the feeling that they were being watched growing with every passing moment. The further she went, the more frantic her thoughts became. Emma had said Derek wasn't just a bystander. He was the one pulling the strings. But what strings? Who was he working for? The danger was no longer a distant threat. It was closing in, tightening around them like a noose. The world Linda had once trusted, the one she had built for herself and her daughter, was crumbling piece by piece. And the people she had relied on, the ones she thought she could trust, were now the ones she had to fear. The truth was out there, hidden beneath layers of lies, and Linda knew that once she uncovered it, everything would change. It wouldn't just be their lives at risk, it would be the lives of everyone around them. She couldn't let this continue. She couldn't allow Emma to become another casualty in a game she didn't choose to play. But what if it was too late? What if they were already trapped in something far bigger than they could ever escape? Suddenly, her phone buzzed, snapping Linda out of her spiraling thoughts. She glanced down at the screen, her pulse quickening when she saw the name. It was Derek. "Don't do anything stupid, Linda. You don't know who you're messing with." The message was short, but it was enough to send a chill racing down her spine. He knew she was getting close to something, and now, it seemed, he was warning her off. But it was too late. Linda had already made her choice. She was going to confront him, find out everything, and make him tell her the truth. Whatever it took, whatever she had to sacrifice, she wasn't turning back. But then came the call that shattered everything. "Linda, it's Emma." Her voice was frantic, raw with fear. "I don't know what to do. I know, Derek's been working with them all along. They've been watching us, Mom. They're everywhere. I think it's too late. You need to leave. Now." Linda's stomach dropped. Her mind raced. Who were they? "Emma, what are you talking about? Who is they?" Linda demanded, her voice trembling, her grip on the wheel tightening. She could hear Emma's breathing on the other end, shaky and frantic. "They know everything, Mom. They've been planning this for years. All of it. The lies, the betrayals. They've been pulling the strings from the very beginning. Derek's not just some random guy. He's a part of a bigger network, a conspiracy you can't even begin to imagine. It's bigger than us, bigger than anything we've seen. And now they've got us. They're coming for you. For me. For all of us." The words hit Linda like a freight train. A conspiracy? She couldn't wrap her mind around it. Bigger than anything they'd seen? How could this have been happening right under their noses? And who were they, really? The people Emma was talking about. What kind of power did they have? Linda's pulse was pounding in her ears now. She wasn't just a victim of a random threat. She was caught in the middle of something that had been building for years, a network of people who had been watching, waiting, and now they were closing in. "I'm scared, Mom. I don't know what to do. They're here. They've been following me." Emma's voice cracked, and Linda could almost hear the panic rising in her daughter's chest. She had to act. There was no time to think. No time to wonder about who these people were, or what they wanted. All that mattered was getting Emma to safety. "Emma, listen to me. I'm coming for you. I'll be there soon, okay? Just stay where you are. Don't move." But even as the words left her mouth, Linda knew how fragile that promise was. She wasn't sure she could protect her daughter from the darkness that was closing in. The car's headlights flickered as Linda turned sharply down a street, her mind racing with every possible scenario. But what she wasn't prepared for was the message that came next. It was a text from Derek. And this time it was more direct. "Stop looking for answers. You don't know what you're up against. Walk away while you still can." Linda's heart skipped a beat. They weren't just trying to intimidate her. They were threatening her. She could feel it in her bones. Their reach was long, their influence vast. If Derek had warned her, then that meant they knew she was close, that she was dangerously close to the truth. As Linda raced toward Emma's location, a terrifying realization hit her. They had no choice but to confront the people behind this conspiracy. But in doing so, they would risk everything. Their safety, their freedom, maybe even their lives. She had no illusions left. There were no safe spaces, no one left to trust. The only option was to fight back.
But how?
How could they possibly take on a shadowy network of powerful, dangerous people who had been manipulating them from the very start? The car screeched to a halt outside Emma's apartment complex. Linda's heart hammered in her chest as she stepped out into the cold night air, the weight of everything pressing down on her. She wasn't prepared for what she was about to find. But as she walked toward the building, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from an unknown number. Linda's pulse quickened. She didn't want to answer, but she had no choice. She picked up. "Linda, it's me," came the voice on the other end. Her breath caught in her throat. It was Derek. "You're too late," he said coldly. "Emma's gone." The world spun around her. Linda stumbled back, feeling the ground fall out from beneath her. Emma, her daughter, was gone. And with her, all of the answers. Linda's body went numb. There was no more running. No more time to protect anyone. The conspiracy had won. And now it was coming for her. Linda's breath was ragged. Each step she took toward the abandoned warehouse, where Emma had last been seen, felt like an eternity. The darkness of the night was overwhelming, the only light coming from the flickering street lamps, casting eerie shadows on the walls around her. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, fear clawing at her insides, desperation twisting her heart. "Emma, please be okay," she prayed silently. But the knot in her stomach told her that whatever she was about to walk into was something far worse than anything she had ever imagined. The game had changed. This wasn't just about her daughter anymore. It was about survival. It was about truth. And it was about facing the darkness head-on. The phone call from Derek had only fueled her rage. "You're too late," his voice had echoed in her mind over and over again. Emma's gone. But was she really? Linda refused to believe it. She refused to believe Derek had won. She knew there was more to this story, and she was going to find it, whatever it took. No more running. No more hiding. This was the moment of truth. As Linda neared the warehouse, she felt an eerie chill in the air. Her instincts screamed at her to turn back, but she pushed forward, each step heavy with the weight of everything that had led up to this point. She had to confront Derek. She had to uncover the truth once and for all. But as she stepped through the cracked doors of the warehouse, she was met with nothing but silence. No sign of Emma. No sound of footsteps or voices. Just the deafening quiet. Her heart raced as she took another step inside, her eyes scanning the dimly lit space. Shadows clung to the corners of the room, and the air felt thick with tension. Then she heard it footsteps. Slow, deliberate, almost as if someone were taunting her. She spun around, but all she saw was darkness. It wasn't until she heard a voice, cold and calm, that she knew she wasn't alone. "I knew you'd come." It was Derek's voice.
Smooth. Calculated.
Linda's eyes narrowed. She had imagined this moment 100 times in her head, but now that it was here, she felt a surge of adrenaline she couldn't suppress. "Where is she, Derek? Where is Emma?" The words came out sharp, laced with desperation. Derek stepped out from the shadows, his face unreadable, the faintest smirk playing at the corners of his lips. "She's gone, Linda. She's been part of this from the beginning." His voice held no remorse, no hint of guilt. He spoke as though he had already won, as though he knew everything was already in motion. Linda felt her knees weaken, her mind racing as she tried to process his words. "Emma? Part of this? It couldn't be." "You're lying," she spat. "You're trying to manipulate me. You think I'm just going to walk away from this? Not a chance." Derek chuckled, a cold, hollow sound that sent shivers down Linda's spine. "I'm not lying. You've seen the pieces. You've uncovered the clues. You just couldn't put it all together." He took a step closer, his eyes cold, calculating. "Emma's been working with me all along. She was always going to be the one to lead you here." The words hit Linda like a punch to the gut. She staggered back, her mind spinning. Emma was in on it.
How could she?
The daughter she had raised, the child she had protected with everything in her. How could Emma have betrayed her like this? Her head was swimming, the walls closing in as the weight of the revelation bore down on her. No, she thought fiercely. No, this isn't how it ends. This isn't the truth. You're wrong, Linda muttered through gritted teeth. You're wrong, Derek. Emma would never side with you. But deep down, she knew there was something bigger here, something she still didn't understand. She had been blind, unable to see the full picture. Derek smiled, a thin, predatory grin. It's already too late. You're here just like I planned. You always were part of the plan. His eyes glinted in the darkness. You've been playing right into our hands, all along. Linda's heart skipped a beat. What plan? Derek didn't answer immediately. Instead, he motioned to the corner of the warehouse, where a faint light illuminated a large computer screen. Linda's gaze followed his gesture, her eyes falling on the digital display. What she saw made her blood run cold. On the screen there was a map that detailed not only her every move over the past few weeks, but Emma's as well. Every phone call, every location they'd visited, every conversation they'd had, it was all there, meticulously tracked. But that wasn't what shook her to the core. It was the names, the people, the network. They had been watching her for longer than she realized. They had manipulated every step, every choice. And now Linda understood what had really been going on. The truth she had been looking for wasn't just about protecting Emma or finding the truth about Derek. It was about uncovering a much darker, much more dang. What is this? Linda whispered, her voice shaking with fear and disbelief. What are you trying to do? Derek's smile widened. We've been running this operation for years, Linda. Your involvement wasn't an accident. You were always meant to be here. You and Emma were part of the equation from the start. Linda's mind was racing, trying to make sense of the puzzle that was falling into place. And then the most unexpected thing happened. A figure stepped out from the shadows behind Derek. Linda froze. It was Emma. Her daughter's face was cold, expressionless. Her eyes locked on Linda's, but there was no recognition, no warmth. Nothing. Linda felt as if the ground beneath her feet had vanished, the world crashing down around her. Emma? Linda whispered, her voice barely audible. Emma didn't speak. She just stood there, a stranger in the body of the daughter Linda had known her whole life. Emma, Linda repeated, this time louder, more desperate. What's going on? Please tell me the truth. What's happening? Emma didn't answer. Instead, she looked at Derek, a small nod passing between them. Derek stepped forward, his hand resting on Emma's shoulder, a possessive, controlling gesture that made Linda's blood boil. Eerie's conspiracy that ran deeper than she could have ever imagined. Your daughter has made her choice, Linda. She's no longer your little girl. She's part of something much bigger than you could ever understand. And now, she's the one who's going to lead this new phase of the operation. Linda's heart shattered, the weight of the betrayal crashing over her like a tidal wave. Emma had been lost to them, and there was nothing Linda could do to save her. But just as she was about to collapse under the enormity of the situation, a loud crash echoed through the warehouse, followed by shouts from outside. The building trembled, as if something massive was coming their way. Linda's head whipped toward the sound, her heart skipping a beat. Before she could react, the door to the warehouse burst open. Armed men rushed in, their guns drawn. And standing at the front was none other than the last person she ever expected. The chaos inside the warehouse seemed to slow down as Linda's heart pounded in her chest, her body frozen as she processed what had just unfolded. The door had burst open, and the armed men who stormed in had only one mission: to finish what Derek had started. But the one thing she hadn't expected, the thing that caught her off guard and sent a wave of relief through her soul, was the person who led the charge. Standing at the forefront, with his face set in determination, was Officer James Thornton, a man she hadn't seen in months. A man who had once been an ally, a friend, until he had vanished without a trace. Step back, Thornton commanded, his voice low but firm, his eyes scanning the room. Linda couldn't move, couldn't speak, as she watched the scene unfold. The armed men were trained, precise, and they moved in perfect sync, surrounding Derek and his group. Derek's smirk faltered as he realized the tide had turned. The tension in the room was palpable, but it wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. Thornton approached Linda, his eyes softening as they met hers. "You're safe now," he said, his tone both reassuring and serious. "They're not going anywhere. This ends tonight." Linda could barely comprehend his words, her mind still reeling from the revelations. Emma, she thought. Her daughter. She turned to look at her, hoping for some sign of recognition, some indication that the girl standing in front of her was still the same person she had raised. But Emma's eyes remained cold and distant, her expression unreadable. It was as if she was trapped in a cage of her own making, caught in the web of lies and manipulation that Derek had woven so carefully. The realization hit Linda hard. Her daughter was gone, and she couldn't bring her back. James Thornton stepped closer, his gaze following Linda's. "I'm sorry you had to go through all of this, but we've got everything we need now. Derek, Emma, they're done." His words should have brought her comfort, but they didn't. They felt hollow.
There was no sense of victory in this.
No sense of relief. Not when she had lost everything. "Where is she?" Linda asked, her voice barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of her despair. Thornton hesitated for a moment before answering. "We're working on getting her out of this. But she's not the same person you knew, Linda. This goes deeper than what anyone realized. We've already traced the connections. This isn't just about her. There's a whole network behind this, and we're just beginning to uncover how far it reaches." Linda closed her eyes, the exhaustion of the past few weeks finally sinking in. Her mind kept racing back to Emma, the little girl she had nurtured, the teenager she had been proud of, and the daughter who had somehow become a part of something she couldn't understand. "How did this happen?" she murmured to herself, more than anyone else. The question had no easy answer. It never would. As the authorities moved in, taking Derek and his associates into custody, Linda's body finally seemed to relax. The immediate threat was over, but the emotional weight remained. Her mind drifted to Emma once more. She knew her daughter wasn't completely gone. She was still there, somewhere beneath the layers of manipulation and lies. But would she ever be the same? Could they ever rebuild what had been broken? Linda felt a hand on her shoulder, and she turned to find Thornton's sympathetic gaze. "You're not alone in this," he said quietly. "We'll help you find a way through it. But right now, you need to focus on what's next. We've got the answers, and now it's up to you how you move forward." Her heart ached with the weight of his words, and yet, in the pit of her stomach, there was something else, a small, quiet hope that had been buried beneath the pain for so long. She still had a future to build, even if it looked nothing like she had imagined. The world around her had been a web of lies, but now she could see a way out. It wasn't perfect, and the scars would remain, but she wasn't going to let this define her. She was still standing. She was still breathing, and she was still fighting. The police began to take Derek and Emma away, and Linda felt a pang of sorrow for the girl she had once known so well. But she also knew this wasn't the end of the story. It couldn't be. As much as she wanted to find peace, as much as she wanted to close this chapter of her life, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the back of her mind that there was more to the story, something darker, more insidious, that was still waiting to be uncovered. Linda took one last look at the scene around her, the flashing red and blue lights casting a surreal glow over the warehouse. The ordeal was over, but the mystery remained unsolved in so many ways. As she turned to leave, she felt the weight of the past few weeks on her shoulders, but also the smallest glimmer of hope. She was free, in a sense, but she knew that freedom came at a price. The truth, no matter how painful, had set her on a new path. And though she didn't have all the answers, she was determined to keep searching. As Linda walked out of the warehouse, the cold night air filled her lungs, and she thought about the future. What did it look like now? Could she rebuild her life? Could she forgive Emma? Could she find a way to heal the wounds that ran so deep? These questions lingered, unresolved, as the story didn't end with clear-cut answers. It wasn't about closure, it was about moving forward one uncertain step at a time. And just as she thought she might have finally found some peace, a single text appeared on her phone screen. The message was simple, direct, and unsettling. "This isn't over. It's just beginning." Linda's heart stopped. The sense of finality she had hoped for evaporated in an instant. And as she stared at the message, she realized that while the conspiracy might have been exposed, the true nature of the forces at play and the power that controlled them was still a mystery she hadn't yet unraveled. She wasn't done. Not yet. The night had only just begun.